Hey YouTube subscribers and YouTube viewers, thanks for joining me today. I want to share with you this great video today that I'm making about all that mess right here. If you know what it is, so you already know what the video is going to be about. It's going to be about transmissions, and obviously it's going to be about Mercedes transmissions because we work only on Mercedes, but it applies to many different transmissions, not necessarily only Mercedes transmission. Although in that case, in this video, we'll talk only about the Mercedes transmission. I'm going to show you how to take apart the Mercedes transmission and what parts you need to replace, the dynamic of the transmission, what is the transmission built out of, and in general, how if you have a problem on Mercedes transmission or on the transmission in general, how to identify what the problem may be and how you fix the problem. So we're going to talk about the valve bodies, conductor plate, different gears, different gear ratios, the case of the transmission, the bell housing, the torque converter too. As you can see, show you how a torque converter looks like. That's a torque converter right there. But shortly I'll bring one out and show you how it looks. Not on the inside because I don't have any torque converter that is open, but I'll explain you what the torque converter's job on a transmission is. So stay tuned for the video and get some more information that you need about how your transmission should operate and what makes it operate not the way that it should. Stay tuned, we're starting the video. Okay, so first of all, there are two most common Mercedes transmissions as of today. There are more than two transmissions from Mercedes, but the most common today are the 722.6 and the 722.9. This one is the 722.6, which is 5 gears transmission, and the 722.9, which is this one, it's a 7-gear transmission, which people are referring to as the 7-tronic or 7G-tronic transmission. I'm going to talk today about the 722.9, although a lot of the information is equal to both of them, besides few changes in the transmission. Of course, the fact that this one got 7 gears and this one got 5 gears, and of course it's going to add more planetary gears into the 722.9. But besides few differences internally in the transmission, and of course also externally, you can see that this transmission look a little longer than this one over here. But beside these changes, both of them do the exact same thing. They take the car from zero and move the car as fast as the driver desired to go. And actually that's the job of the transmission. The transmission is the drivetrain of the car. It takes power from the engine itself, which connects through a torque converter on the front of the transmission, which is basically equal to what used to be on stick shift, the clutch. Take the torque from the engine, convert it into the torque of the transmission. You have the input shaft over here, you have the output shaft over here, that this one will basically go, let me turn the transmission so you can see. This one will be translated throughout the transmission from different drive ratios from the inside to the outside, and from here it goes through the drive shaft to the rear differential of the car and of course to the wheels. So we're going to look at this transmission, we're going to open it up, look what are the problems that you may have on a transmission, and see how to change things inside internally that might cause problems. Stay tuned. Okay, so how do you open the transmission? As a matter of fact, it's very simple to open the transmission. I'll show you over here. First of all, you got 2 screws on the back here, one and one parallel on the other side, and then you'll open all the screws on the outside over here. And usually when you open screws, you don't want to open in like in one way. You want to open one on the top, one on the bottom, that way that you release the pressure equally on everything, and you don't release pressure on one side and then you can crack the bell housing. You'll go to the back of the transmission to release actually the gears from the inside. You got a little bolt over here, I think it's 32 millimeters. You open this one, then you can take the whatever connects to the drive shaft out, and then the whole gears will be pulled over from this side after you open all the screws, of course. This is, by the way, the pump. The hydraulic pump would create the pressure inside the transmission, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. After you open these screws, you can actually, here I got a transmission already that we opened the screws. And of course, needless to say, you have to pull the torque converter, this one, you have to pull it out to be able to get to all the screws. This torque converter sits right here. That's actually what's holding the transmission, sits right here on the transmission. And you have the shaft from the transmission goes inside here, and on the outside it's actually connected to the engine with the bolts over on this section. It's connected to the engine, and when the engine spins and turns, it will connect through the center to the shaft of the transmission, and that's actually how it's connecting, how it's turning the transmission. So the faster you're going to go inside the torque converter, there are different impellers that will spin against each other and create, with the hydraulic fluid, of course, with the transmission fluid, create pressure that will turn both of them together and will translate the force from the engine to the transmission. After you take the torque converter out, you come to the transmission, of course, after you open all the bolts, and then you can remove the case, and I'll show you in a second how the case comes out and what you have under the case. Bear with me. Okay, so after the case is removed, basically this is one of the gears, sits inside. I'm not going to put it all the way in, but as you can see, this is what they call a planet. You got 1, 2, 3, 4 planet. All of that is considered as a planetary gear. You have the ring on the outside, and you have the sun on the inside. Let me see if I can flip that over, show you the sign. This is more like professional terminology, not really necessary. We can't see the sun, but the sun is inside, and the planetary gears will basically spin around the sun. Let's see if we can see it from here. Spin around the sun, and that's how it changes gear ratio or position of the gears, if they're going to go forward or go reverse. It's going to be different gear locking in different position with the hydraulic fluid. The hydraulic fluid actually from the pump, which is located, as we say, on the bottom of that. Let's see if we can see it. No, we can't see it from here. But the pump will create oil pressure, extremely strong oil pressure. And by creating the oil pressure from the valve body, and we'll talk about the valve body later, by the valve body it will route it into different places, which will engage different gears and create a different output ratio from the input. The input never changes. The input stays always from the motor. So if you accelerate the motor, the torque converter is going to spin faster, which will make the input go faster, but the speed of the engine determines how fast the torque converter spins. Now, I'm not going to get into the dynamics of a torque converter, how exactly it works, but the faster the engine revs, the faster the impeller inside the torque converter goes, and the faster, the more the transmission gonna have an input ratio. It means it will spin faster and will increase the speed of the input of the transmission, that of course, according to many other sensors inside the car, like the throttle position sensor or the speed sensors of the wheels, the transmission brain will determine what gear to engage to receive the right output on the output shaft, to make sure that the car is really responding to the speed of whatever the driver desires to go. So so far we opened the gear, we opened the transmission, and you've seen the bell housing, the case, the different gears inside. I'm going to show you what are the things that may go wrong inside the gear and what might be the results of whatever goes wrong. And after I'm showing you that, we'll talk about a little bit about the valve body. I have a different videos that talk about the Mercedes valve body and the conductor plate, or what we call the integrated VGS on this specific transmission on the 722-9. I have a different video that talks about it. If you want to watch it, just look for, subscribe to my channel, of course, and then you can look for other videos that I have. But one of my videos, I talk about the conductor plate, and I'm not going to talk too much about the conductor plate. Just explain that the conductor plate is actually In that specific case, the brain is over here, the solenoid's over here, and the brain takes information throughout the car and determine which solenoid to engage in order to create pressure in different places in the valve body to engage different gear, to give you a different output ratio or reverse in the car. So stay tuned. I'll take the transmission apart, I'll get all the clutches out, and I'll show you what are the things that can go wrong on the transmission. Alright, so here you can see I opened the transmission and I spread everything throughout the table. So you can see it's really complicated. You know, if you really don't know what you're doing, don't open a transmission. It's not, you know, there's a lot of mechanically inclined people that think that, oh, I can do everything. In that case, I can tell you that it's really complicated. You need to know what you're doing when it comes to transmissions. And you need to make sure that you know, you have the experience, you have the knowledge, you have the understanding of the dynamic of the transmission to be able to rebuild the transmission. So if I had to say what's my opinion about this video, I think it's more of kind of like helping you understand what is inside the transmission and showing it to you, versus helping you, giving you advice on how to rebuild the transmission. So this is definitely not for the do-it-yourselfers. And it's more kind of like input on knowing what is inside the transmission, help you kind of like understand how your car operates. If you've been watching it so far, this video is not going to tell you how to rebuild the transmission. I want to make sure that I'm clear on that. Just more going to tell you what are the parts inside the transmission. So as you can see here on the table, I opened everything apart and I kind of spread it around. So you're going to be able to see everything that goes into the transmission. And as you can see, I'll go backward a little bit so you see everything. Told you about the case that is over there. Here is the bell housing. Here is the valve body, the conductor plate or the integrated VGS transmission control unit. Some of the bolts that I laid down. Now I wanted to show you what are the parts that actually, when we rebuild the transmission, what are the parts that we replace. So give me a second, I'll zoom into the parts and I'll explain you on each one of them and what can cause a problem on your transmission, and why when that part goes bad, the problem consists on the transmission, and why the only way to fix the problem is basically to rebuild the transmission. One of the things I want to say is, like, you know, a lot of people think, oh, my car sleeps only on gear number 2. So why won't you just fix number 2? When you already open the transmission, most of the labor put into it, replacing only one clutch is on one gear, or replacing all of it, the difference on the price doesn't reflect that big of a difference. So once you already open everything, might as well change all the parts that needs to be changed. So give me a second and I'll show you the parts that needs to be replaced. Okay, in one of my previous videos, I was talking about the valve body and the communicator, the computer, the control unit, the conductor plate, integrated VGS. I'm not going to deal with that in this video. The other things that we changed, but we do open the valve body when we rebuild transmission and clean everything and check all the valves themselves, the springs, make sure we don't have gaps more than we should, make sure of them, all of them moving freely. What I do want to show you is the things that needs to be replaced when you rebuild the transmission. We got different gear ratios. This is what is known as the planetary gear. We have 2 of them on the 722-9 transmissions. That's the second one. Planetary, again, because we got the sun, we got the planets around, we got the ring around the planets, and that's actually changing gear ratios. So every time a different ratio, a different gear will engage and hold different parts of it. So the output, what's going to come out from the output shaft, which is this one right here that goes into your rear drive shaft, will come to in a different ratio. It means if the engine gives you, let's say, 500 rounds per minute, and you have a different ratio or overdrive of the output, you're going to get more. I'm not sure what's the formula exactly how to calculate it, but you're going to get, instead of 500 rounds per minute, you're going to get 1,000 rounds per minute on the output, or 1.5 times of the 500, you'll get 750, which will make your car go faster. So each one of these clutches will engage in a different gear and make the car drive faster and faster, or downshift and make the cars go slower and slower. In order for that to happen, you have, of course, the oil pump that we were talking about that later. Let me see if I can see. Here is the oil pump. This is the pump. Basically, the oil comes in from one side, goes out from the other. The ring in the middle will compress the oil and make it actually suck it from one side, and the force, the centrifugal force of the oil will get pushed from the other. Is where, let me see, I'll move it out. Oh, here. It will come in from here, get out from here, and then by getting out, it will create the hydraulic force of the oil that will then go to different valves in the valve body, and according to the shifting of the gear, will decide if you're upshifting or downshifting. If it opens a different channel for the oil to travel from and come out from the different side to engage a different gear, to move the car to a different in a different speed. So the things that we're changing on the transmission to make sure that once the transmission comes with the problem and everything, the problem goes away, when we take a transmission out, we replace everything that needs to be replaced. Of course, we inspect everything on a planetary gear. You don't have to change it. You may have to change bushings. Let me see if I can show you something in between here. You see these bushings in the middle? Sometimes I've seen some gears coming and you'll have too much play over here, and then you have to change the bushings themselves on the planetary gear or on different gears. You may have to replace bearings too. These are bearings, for example. You look at the bearings, you inspect everything. Well, I can't get that out without opening the ring around it. But you inspect the bearings and you look at everything else and make sure you don't have any particles stuck inside, and you don't have any bearings that are not round or have any kind of a damage. And of course, something like that you're going to find out when you drop the oil out of the transmission. You're going to look for different particles in the oil itself. And if you do notice that you find some kind of metal pieces or stuff like that, then of course the way you're going to inspect the parts inside of the transmission is going to be different. You're not going to look at it the same way, because you're going to look where these metal pieces came from. Now, there is a difference between clutch debris that comes out of the transmission, it's going to make the oil look like that, and metal particles that we don't have in that case, but going to look like metal shavings. I don't have a whole lot of time to talk about all this stuff in this video, because I got to try and stay within a reasonable amount of time that people still going to want to watch it and not just shut it down. But I'm real quick going to show you the parts that we're changing in the transmission, and this video pretty much going to come to an end. But this is one of the pistons, for example, that we're changing. It's compressed inside. Actually, that's the ring that's holding the piston. That's the piston itself. There is a ring around it, an O-ring around it, a seal that we're changing. Of course, all the clutches that are inside, these are the clutches that you have inside. And we're changing the clutches. We're changing all the gaskets that we have, like this one, for example, over here. We have a gasket here that we're changing. We're changing all the seals. We have a bunch of seals throughout the transmission, like this one's, for example, here. This seals over here. This seals over here, more on the bottom. We're changing. There are a few more seals. Let me see if I can get to show you some more seals. Well, I can't really find them right now, but here is another piston that we're going to have to compress, and there are special tools that we're using. I'll show you one of the tools. It's a special transmission press. You're putting basically the gear over here and pushing that with your foot, and then this tool will sit around the piston itself and compress it out. So I'm going to check and see if I have enough time with all the videos that I took, but if not, this is how to rebuild the 722-9 transmission on a Mercedes. This is how it looks when everything is apart, and after everything is back in, it's going to look like something like this one over there. Thanks for watching it, and subscribe to my channel, and if you like the videos, just give me the thumbs up. Thanks.